So at the end of class, I'll grab that essay response along with your notes on the videos, and then I'll be giving you these books. But I have saved the most fascinating part of today's class for the end, which is the lecture on John Milton. I'm very excited. You should not be though. Because if you remember correctly, our timeline, which you're going to see this so much, you're already sick of it. We have basically 4 works of literature to place. Beowulf, as you know, goes here. Canterbury Tales goes here. Gulliver's Travels goes in the 1700s, so I'll put it here. Milton, to give you some perspective, is writing in the late 1600s, so he goes here. On our timeline, this is how the 4 works are laid out. These are also the only ones that are going to be somewhat seeming chronological. Technically, Gulliver's Travels was after Paradise Lost. We looked at it before, but all of our works are spread out like so. Now, as I told you last class, everything we read from this point on will be in this block of time, which is basically 1500 up to present day. We'll be scattering them around. Milton is before Swift. He's after Shakespeare. So Shakespeare is here. Shake, Mill, Swift. As long as you remember that order, the exact dates aren't quite as important. Shakespeare comes along first. Shakespeare brings with him the Renaissance. Shakespeare's writing 1564 to 1616, but Shakespeare, then John Milton, and then Swift, in this order, and then their most notable works. With Shakespeare, you already know most of his notable works, and we're spending the entirety of Tuesday's class talking about Shakespeare. Milton is most famous for Paradise Lost, which you read approximately a fourth of. You read books 1, 4, and 9. So with this placement on our timeline, it's now important to recognize what it is that he's writing. If you remember last time, we talked about Beowulf ultimately being an epic poem, in the vein of what other 3 famous epic poems?
Iliad.
Andrew, one of them?
Iliad.
Odyssey and Aeneid are 3 famous epic poems, 2 Greek, 1 Roman, and then Beowulf. The most famous epic poem in English comes from John Milton, and that is, of course, Paradise Lost. Now, your poems like the Iliad and the Aeneid, both are very important to their cultures because they are epic poems that tell the history of that culture. Okay, the Iliad chronicles what famous war? The Trojan War, wherein you have the Greeks fighting the Trojans. Troy falls, Troy is destroyed. But it tells the story of Greek civilization. The Aeneid takes place at the Trojan War and tells the story of the founding of the Roman Republic. Milton, when he set out to write, he decided, I want to write an epic poem, because this is something that happens to all of us at some point in our lives. We wake up and say, time to write that epic poem, let me just get started on that. Milton did that, and Milton thought, I'm going to write a poem about the founding of Britannia, Britain. I'm going to write an epic poem about King Arthur. Because, I mean, come on, who doesn't love King Arthur? King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, Lancelot, Guinevere, all of that. I'm going to write an epic poem about King Arthur that will tell the story of how England came to be. Then he stepped back a minute, and he said, you know what? I want to do something bigger. I want to do something larger. I want to do something in scope that has never been done before. I'm not going to tell the foundation of England. I'm not going to tell the foundation of Europe or of even Western civilization. I'm going to tell the story that began all stories. The foundational, most essential story in all of humanity. Which for Milton was what story? The creation story. I'm going to take a story that in the book of Genesis spans 1 to 3 chapters, a few pages, and I'm going to tell that story in 12 books of poetry. Okay, if we flash forward just a moment to the year 2015, sitting here in June in classroom 229 at CHCA. Approximately 11:25, approximately 35 minutes from the time that you are released to go actually have fun today. You don't care about the 12 books of poetry that John Milton wrote. I get that. I completely get that. But these are quite possibly the 12 most important books of poetry in the English language. They're certainly up there with the finest. You're talking about one of the greatest pieces of literature in British literature. A literature that has spanned from 500 BC all the way up to now. 500 AD, thank you. All the way up till now. This is huge. Even if we don't like it, we still need to at least appreciate it, because this has influenced so much of our civilization. In fact, a lot of what we know about the creation story in the Garden of Eden has come not from the Bible, but from John Milton and Paradise Lost. The text has become so essential to the story that it has actually added things to the story. I mean, keep this in mind. His source material is a few pages long. His poem is 12 books long. He's obviously going to add to the source material. And it's what he adds that's so key and significant, both about his time period and about the nature of Christianity altogether. Okay, pause for a moment. Christian school, Christianity, all that jazz, I get it. It is not essential that you believe the creation story actually happened. It's not essential. It's not essential that you believe that the world was created in 6 literal 24-hour days. It's not even essential that you believe that Adam and Eve existed. None of this is essential. What's essential is that you recognize the importance of this story. Now, I know you got into some of this discussion sophomore and junior year of Christian studies. At least I think you did. Let me ask you this question. Why is the story of Adam and Eve important? Not the facts. Why is the story important?
It shows a lot about human nature.
It does what?
It shows a lot about human nature.
Fair point. What else? Shows a lot about human nature. What else?
How sin entered the world.
Why would that be significant, Sam?
Because it's like really obvious that there's a lot of sin today. So like people, I don't know, if you come to question ask, like, if God created the world, how is there this much sin in the world? And so that's a good thing to go back to.
This is a central question in today's society. I mean, why does the world suck? Why do bad things happen? We've been asking this question since the dawn of time. You know, I'm a good person, and yet crap happens. All of you read JB in 10th grade. That's the story. You got this guy piles all of this crap onto his life. And the question is, why is this happening? And the fact is, we don't have clear-cut answers for this. The story of Adam and Eve purports to give us one. That's important. It tells a lot about human nature. What else? Why is it important?
Why is it important to Christians, or why is it important to people in
To
general?
people in general. Why is it significant that every single person know the story of Adam and Eve? Why is that important?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Most cultures, with any sort of belief system whatsoever, have stories that purport to do what?
Tell the story of creation.
Explain creation. I mean, if you think about it, creation itself is a mystifying thing. How did we come to be here? What is our purpose? What's the point of all of this? And so you have lots of creation stories, and all of them virtually do the same thing. They tell us how creation came to be, and a lot of them have unifying elements in them. The story of Adam and Eve is central not just to Christian religion, but to all of Western civilization. Much of our literature, much of our art, much of our contributions to culture stem from these stories. So what Milton does is he takes the story of Adam and Eve, shows how this is the central story of all stories, and he makes it his story in Paradise Lost. But what he does is pretty key. We all know the story of Adam and Eve and its basic component parts. So here they are, laid out. Got a dude with a sensor bar. Got a girl with 2 sensor bars. frolicking in a garden. Am I right? Sounds pretty nice, okay? Except they're given a task by God, which is what?
Don't eat from the one tree.
Okay, they're given a rule, but they're also given a job. What's their initial job?
Take care of the garden.
Take care of the garden. Name the animals, take care of the garden, and make babies. I mean, this sounds pretty nice, okay? So that's what they do, but they're given the one rule. They are told, do whatever you want, eat whatever you want, be whoever you want, but
No, I got it, why it's important. It teaches environmental consciousness.
Yeah.
please explain.
You gotta take care of what God gave you, right? Did you hear that the Pope is sending a letter saying that people need to be more environmentally conscious, and that it's gonna be included in sermons?
We do, otherwise we're going to be not on this earth. I gave a great speech about it almost a week ago.
You know, I just saw a movie last night that many of you have seen called Kingsman: The Secret Service, which ultimately purports the same thing, which is that humans are viruses.
We
and
are.
that we have to be destroyed
Yeah, absolutely.
lest we destroy our host. Earth.
True.
Yes.
That's why we have
100%.
tornadoes and hurricanes.
Hence Mother
They're here
Nature.
to destroy
It's
us.
God saying you done messed up.
This is Mother Nature saying that she can't take
Completely the opposite of Bunny Trump.
Now, keep this in mind. Early on in our story, where we have perfection, absolute perfect garden, everything is great. Do not eat of this tree. What's the tree, by the way?
Knowledge and power.
Knowledge of good and evil. That's the important thing here. Do not eat of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, especially this juicy little piece of fruit, because that would be bad. Eve eats the fruit. Nom, 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 nom. Yum. She gives some to Adam. Adam eats it. Nom, 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 nom. Boom. Both are open-eyed now. The veil has been lifted. The veil of ignorance. If you remember reading A Separate Piece, all of these coming-of-age stories follow the move of ignorance to what? What's the opposite of ignorance?
Enlightenment.
To non-ignorance, which is knowledge. And the equation of ignorance with innocence is documented. To be innocent is to be ignorant. What is the loss of innocence?
Enlightenment.
What causes loss of innocence? Knowledge, but knowledge which brings
Information.
experience. If you are experienced, you are no longer innocent. Adam and Eve simultaneously gain knowledge, they gain experience, they are like God. But this explains the story of the fall. Why are humans corrupt? Why are things bad? Well, because of the fall. This is the typical age-old Christian answer to go to. Anymore, it's not very chic, it's not very cool to believe in an actual Adam, an actual Eve, and an actual fall. But the story is significant because it does explain, in a human origin sense, why things are so messed up. Because some girl ate some fruit and gave some to her husband, and now everything's been messed up. The sin that entered the world. So we're starting from a basis, not that this is the factual story we have to study, but this is a huge explanation for why things are the way they are. That's why Milton chooses this story. But in writing about this story, he decides to focus on the fall before the fall. He starts, the term is, what? What does that mean?
In the middle of things.
In the middle of things. He starts right after the first fall. And what is the first fall? Satan's fall. What is the traditional name of Satan that we have? Lucifer. Lucifer falls from heaven. Do you know the story?
Yes.
Can you give us the rundown?
Doesn't he get upset that like God has so much power and stuff, and so he is like, hey, why don't you share it with us? And God says no, and then he gets upset and tries to revolt against God, and then God banishes him.
Precisely the story. God banishes him along with what fraction of the other angels? 1/3. They're banished from heaven, kicked to the pit of hell, where they decide, let's get God back by going to earth and messing with his creation. Thus the plot of Paradise Lost. It begins in the middle of things. How does Paradise Lost open? Book 1. Where are we?
Hell.
Hell, lake of fire, burning lake, Satan wakes up. Says, oh, ouch, yikes. Let me get out of here. Let me call forth my legions and go to corrupt the world. That's how it opens, that's how it begins. And what you find is that Milton is simultaneously telling the biblical story of creation, we get that, but he's doing it in the mode of epic poetry. As we looked at the other day, Beowulf, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, what do these epic poems have at their core?
A story that I actually want to read, but not this one.
I can get that, and I can value that and appreciate that, except I will say this. This is a pretty amazing poem. And when you get what he's doing, and what he might not even be intentionally doing, it becomes well worth reading.
What is it now?
We dismiss it as Sunday school nonsense.
No, I haven't done that, I just don't like reading.
And it's boring. Sunday school nonsense is boring. But keep this in mind. Epic poems have at their core an epic story. And an epic story is brought about by what? A hero. The heroic code. The hero. In all of these, the hero is clear-cut. You take the Iliad, Achilles, boom, powerful. He's the man, he's awesome. You take the Odyssey, Odysseus, he's smart, he's strong, he's capable. He's awesome. You take the Aeneid, you take Aeneas. You look at Beowulf, my gosh, he's awesome. Then you get to Paradise Lost. And all of a sudden, there's this huge question mark. Because you say, I'm writing an epic poem about the Garden of Eden, about the fall, about the nature of humanity. And automatically you think, well, the hero is probably going to be God. But when you read God in this book, and specifically in book 3, which you didn't read, you realize he's kind of a punk. In Paradise Lost, he's kind of a punk. And he's not heroic. He's kind of mean and spiteful. Then you're like, well, obviously, Jesus. When in doubt, Jesus is the answer. I mean, come on, that's right. You know, that is the case here. Except here's the problem. Minor role in Paradise Lost, and just does as he's told. Which if you look at epic poetry and epic heroes, they do the opposite. They have a major role, they usually do what they're not told to do, and they're usually amazing in doing it. Then you're like, well, obviously, it's Adam. He's the man. It's Adam, for crying out loud. He's the first man. He has to be the hero. But there are problems and complications with that. So then you're like, well, dude, who's the hero?
Satan.
And then you look at how it opens. You look at how it begins. You look at the struggle, the conquest. You look at the fury, the wrath. The Iliad opens with the line, "Sing, O muse, of the wrath of Achilles." At the very beginning, the person who's mad is the person tied to a burning lake of fire. And by the way, he's tied to that lake of fire with chains that are made of what? Starts with an A. And it also just happens to be inside Wolverine.
Adamantine.
Yes. Which is what kind of steel?
The best.
Unbreakable.
Yar.
He is tied to the lake of fire in unbreakable chains. And what does he do? He breaks them.
Hero.
And gets free.
Hero.
He then calls forth his legions. Now get this image in your mind. You have just followed some guy who you thought was the guy. You put all your faith and trust in him. And now, because of him, you are tied to burning water. You're probably not going to like that guy very much. His job is to get all of these angels back on his side after they've suffered unspeakable torment. That's difficult to do. Then he has to rally the troops and go finish the job. Now, when Milton wrote Paradise Lost in the 1600s, people didn't read it and say, oh my gosh, Satan is heroic. But over time, more and more readers came to it and said, it's kind of weird, but I'm really drawn to this character of Satan. He really has an appeal to him. Which initially readers would say, well, that's just because he's temptation, he's the devil. That's what C.S. Lewis said. Lewis said, you're drawn to Satan because he's tempting, he's Satan. But there's there's something more to it than that. And Lord Byron said it best when he first pointed this out, which is actually why we now add the adjective to the word hero.
It's like an ironic hero, but it's Byronic.
Not actually why, it's because
he's
Lord Byron,
ironic, he's Byronic.
Lord Byron came along and said, you know what? Milton, without knowing it, was in the devil's party. In other words, however this came about, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't his intent, but however it came about, Satan comes across as the most heroic in this poem. And there's something to be said for that. He begins the story, he fights, he struggles, he overcomes. He's got a lot of pride, which all of our epic heroes have, and the pride does lead at times to his downfall. I mean, think about it. From the very beginning, why does he fall from heaven?
He wanted to overthrow God.
He wanted to be more powerful than God. His pride led him to believe that he could, and he fell. But he gets right back up again, like we often envision our heroes doing, and goes back to the fight, and goes back to take on the power. The person who says, no, you can't, he says, yes, I can. As a result, he's dark, brooding, mysterious, and strangely alluring, which are 4 characteristics of the Byronic hero. The dark hero. This is a hero that we're going to encounter when we read Jane Eyre. It's a hero that's becoming all more increasingly popular today, even with our comic book heroes. Look at the newer Batman. Christopher Nolan puts out Batman Begins. Batman is dark, he's mysterious, he has a horror to him almost that you don't get in the early Bruce Wayne, who's the Tim.
Clooney's got the nipples.
Yes, he does. Who's the guy who did the Michael Keaton Batmans?
Tim Burton.
Tim Burton. Yeah, Tim Burton. The Tim Burton Batman is cute, funny, and goofy. Christopher Nolan comes along and brings darkness to it, fear to the story of Batman. Look at the hideous but somehow alluring Spider-Man 3. I'm not talking about the Andrew Garfield one, I'm talking about the one where Spider-Man encounters his dark self,
Oh, yeah, Venom.
his evil self, okay? We do this a lot with our heroes. We give them a dark side that they have to overcome, which in many ways goes back to this idea of the Byronic hero. So what Milton does is he takes the story of Paradise Lost, of Eden, and in 12 books of poetry, he shows how the fall came about. And what's crazy that you realize when you're reading, the fall itself, the Garden of Eden fall, doesn't happen until book 9. He spends 8 books setting up this moment so that when Eve takes that fruit from the tree and eats, that moment, so essential in our story, is but a passing line. It says, she plucked, she ate, and earth uttered a groan. In that moment, humanity was damned forevermore, until one greater man restore us. And that's what we're going to look at now. Part of the reason I wanted you to read Paradise Lost was, first of all, to understand its place in the canon of literature as an essential epic poem, partly to understand the Byronic hero, but also because we're going to use this as our first test case in what we're going to call close reading. Now, we did close reading a bit in 10th grade. Most of you did close reading your junior year. Close reading is when you take a small piece of text, you look at every single specific, small, minute detail. The words, the punctuation, the aspects of the text in terms of figurative language, and you determine the overall central purpose. So, this is what I want you to make note of. We're going to do this in just a moment with the first 26 lines of Paradise Lost. But, a close reading and by the way, this is going to be hugely important both with Hamlet next Tuesday and with poetry next Thursday. The close reading takes the text as a bubble. It looks first of all at the diction. What is diction?
Word choice.
Word choice. This is significant when it comes specifically to denotation, which means what?
Definite meaning.
definite meaning, dictionary definition, and then connotation, which is,
Subjective meaning.
so denotation and connotation. And don't worry, we'll be talking about these a lot over the next 2 weeks. Then it looks at syntax, which is not just word order, it's punctuation, it's sentence length, it's a lot of things combined. Then it looks at elements such as tone, or attitude, feeling. It looks at the imagery, which is sense experience. All of this to determine what is the central purpose of the passage. Now, that's a quick overview. Unfortunately, we're going to be getting a lot of quick overviews in this class, but we're going to look at it more specifically with this passage from Paradise Lost. So, go ahead and grab your book, open up to Book 1, Line 1, and we'll get started.